It's been over 6 weeks where Final Fantasy Tactics the Ivalice Chronicles was occupying most of my hobby time. But finally I can say that I'm done with this title, at least for a while. And I have some conclusions on this remaster, or is it a remake? I never remember which one is which. Nevertheless, time for my first review on this channel. Bear with me on this one. It's a new format and I have no idea what will work or not. But I decided to put my twist on this thing. Since most of my subscribers arrived here via my guides with more focus on the game mechanics, I'll try to focus on that aspect of the game. Both the good sides and the bad ones. And after that I'll give you a list of my recommendation for other titles that offer similar types of entertainment. So let's do this. I think it's customary to start from the pros and then move to the cons. There's quite a few of those. I think the first on my list would be the story. I had little less enjoyment from it than 25 years ago, but that is understandable. I remembered most of the plot points after all. Plotline is still a very good execution of the classical hero's journey trope, with some nice inclusion sprinkles here and there. The addition of the Chronicles section in the game menu is great for people who take long breaks between game sessions and need a refresher on the game's storyline, characters and plot points. The voice acting puts the narrative on a different level, making it a great experience even for people who are only mildly interested in the gameplay style. And this can easily move us to the next pro on the list. Addition on the Squire mode. It's a great feature that allows much wider player base to enjoy the title, especially if they are more story-oriented. Core game mechanics are not changed or simplified, so if they want to transition to the default difficulty, there's no mechanical issues. Tutorialization in the game is, well, it could be better, but at least it was improved in comparison to the original release. Same with accessibility to the information in-game. The job system and its UI is quite easy to use. I've even mentioned this in my first impressions video about game systems. My opinion from then still stands. It's a clear improvement over the original release and a boon for new players. Addition of gear/skill sets for each character is also a great feature to have. It encourages experimentation, since you can have an easy way to return to your favorite setup if the experiment does not work out. I also love the improvement of encounter systems. Ability to retry the battle from the menu with the option of skipping the party deployment step is a godsend in some cases. Not to mention that every speedrunner's dream of skipping random encounters and triggering one on demand is also implemented here. Without this, hunting some of the special random encounters would be a nightmare. The main part of the game, the encounters themselves, are also quite well implemented. Combat UI is clean and concise, gives you required info, and it has now some more details that highlight otherwise obscure game design choices. On a more technical note, game performance seems to be quite fine. Despite the nouveau bundled with the game, I haven't had any problems or stuttering on both machines I've played the game on, and the weaker one was from 2018. Of course, there shouldn't be any issue with that from the get-go, but we all know how some of the game remasters look and perform nowadays. And with that, it's time to move to the more critical section of the video. Nostalgia is a funny thing. I remember this game quite fondly. Maybe that's why after replaying it during much more jaded time in my life, I have quite a few issues with a lot of design choices and implementation. Or I'm just that old and had exposure to much more similar things and can easily pinpoint weaknesses and flaws thanks to that. Following the same list, I'll start with the story. My biggest issue here is a lack of replayability. There's no choices that impact the storyline or ending, and once you reach the end of the plot, there's really no incentive to play more, other than completing the arbitrary list of in-game challenges. I don't buy the argument of it's an old game, since we have examples that invalidate this altogether. Not to mention there's also the War of the Lion content that wasn't included in the release, despite reusing the cinematics and translation. There's also removed jobs in the game files, if my memory serves me correctly. If they really wanted to preserve the original experience, they could add War of the Lions content as a New Game Plus feature. I think it would be received quite positively. At this point, I'm kind of afraid that they will ship the content as a DLC in a year or two, which would be a really big move. And while I praise the Chronicles system as an improvement for new players, I have a big issue with it. Why aren't all of those walls of text voice acted? They hired a VA for Araslam for the lines in the menu. He could do the reading of all that war building goodness they stashed here. Speaking of additions, Tactician mode was my biggest disappointment. While Squire is great functionality that targets new audience, Tactician, in my opinion, should be a challenge to veteran players and force some new challenges in. And what do we get? Artificial damage cap on some skills, increased damage taken, and decreased damage done. So what's the impact of it in the gameplay experience? The same encounters with no changes to even enemy positioning, and practically forcing you to play a very specific strategy in the early game and minimaxing in the mid to late game. Bosses that are one-shotting your team with non-evadable AoE damage unless you spend a few turns debuffing them are not difficult, they are just annoying. Same with the enemy units that can just nuke your whole team with a single summon since it has a flat plus 20% damage boost. And the only thing you can do to avoid it is rush into said summoner and kill him before he wipes your party. Of course you deal reduced damage to him, because that's very tactical. At the start of the game I enjoyed the need of changing my gameplay from usual BS and having to manage my composition with some crowd control to survive encounters. But after a while I realized that this is not exactly a difficulty increase. I still could level someone in Arithmetician, give him a chameleon robe and just cast Holy on all targets. There were no changes in the overall flow of the battle, just artificial advantage to the enemy team. In my mind this mode would, for example, give enemies in the encounter better skills or movement range, so they can reach you faster. And you need to use terrain to your advantage, focus fire, etc. Or add some additional units to the battlefield, so you need to adapt on the fly for surprise variable. But I didn't even get the enemy level synced to the party levels in the story encounters. You literally can outgrind any difficulty by leveling jobs on your characters. After doing 100% on Tactician, I think my recommendation would be don't bother with it, it's just a waste of time. Moving on, my issues with information availability in the game. While tutorialization was improved, is still abysmal. The game hides so much information from you in some wall of text deep in the menu that's not even fun. We have a nice combat UI, so why not display a percentage chance of triggering enemy reaction ability so a casual user can figure out that it's based on bravery, and he can use skills that reduce its value to debuff the enemy? We have the space. The info is not some data mined secret, and is quite important to the gameplay. And now it's time for my probably biggest rant in this video. Job system. Its impact on the core gameplay loop, and impact that Tactician difficulty had on it. The surface level is great. As I mentioned earlier, new players will have a clean and fun experience. But for an invested player base, it is annoying that the game hides all the numbers and you need to dig them out on the internet. Most annoying culprit here is the stat gain system. I have no idea why it was designed in this way and why it is so convoluted. And it's also unclear to me why most of the caster classes have the same magic attack growth as a knight. I also find it quite unintuitive that the best build for mage would be level in Thief and Ninja till 99 and then just switch up to Black Mage, Time Mage or Summoner. Your magic attack will be the same, but you will have better speed. Yes, MP will be lower, but if everything dies in one hit, how's that a problem? Speaking of magical attack and obfuscation, why there's no indication to the player which skills take fate in their calculation and which don't? How a normal person figure out that samurai is perfectly fine with minimal fate value? I'll admit, this annoys me much more than it should. Almost as much as abilities balance. Some of them are borderline OP, and the rest is almost useless in comparison. This issue is absolutely highlighted on Tactician, since the modifiers on numbers there are just pure BS. Most of the reaction skills fall short of Shira Hadori and reflexes, especially counter. I think I've never had it trigger, since if someone was hitting the unit that has it slotted, they usually just one-shotted it with raw damage power. At the end, almost everyone in my party was running with one of those skills, since without them there was a very high chance of "Surprise, you're dead from full HP, teehee." No counterplay, just a long-range instant speed attack with ridiculous damage. The issue magnifies the deeper into game you go. Since Chapter 3 almost all encounters played the same. Disable/remove units that deal non-evadable damage, and mop up the rest of the dorks you are essentially immune to. It was boring to the degree I've started doing builds more for flavor than optimization. But the positive of this is the fact that my guides now exist and you folks listen to my ramblings. I'm not going to touch Orlando as a topic. I think everyone agrees that this is a design mistake. But I'll rant about the gear a little. The design of the game in this aspect is a little bit flawed. The best equipment in the game is the one that gives you the biggest bonus to Ralph's offensive stats. But that's hidden from casual users, who can actually hinder their playthrough just by buying upgrades each time they become available. Heavy armor is practically useless, since the best defense is not getting hit and having very low fate. This also makes or breaks a job. Why run a knight if ninja can do everything they can do but faster, stronger and twice per turn? My point is, balance flies out of the window quite early on, and the simplicity of the game from the tactical point of view leads to perfect solutions. There's a saying that players will always optimize their fun, and FFT really incentivized that approach. Okay, time for the encounters. Why, for Cthulhu's sake, we don't have a fast forward toggle? Do I really need to hold the button down for the entire duration of the fight? You give me option to go fast, so let me go fast all the time. With that out of my system, I can also mention the issues I have with rare battles. Some of you may not even know that they exist, since to trigger them you not only need to progress the story to a specific flag, but also go to specific map from specific destination, and then hit a 20% chance of triggering it. I needed a 15-year-old GameFAQs guide for that. How is a casual player supposed to figure this out? There's not even a mention of this in Chronicles menu. Other than that, my biggest issue would be the mission objectives. Other than occasional protect or kill a specific unit on the map, there's basically zero diversity in objectives. And those two types of missions aren't exactly exciting either. For assassination missions there's basically no strategy whatsoever. Just rush and nuke the target, ignoring the rest of the units. Protection encounters are even worse. The AI tends to kill itself, sometimes before you even have a chance to do anything if your setup is not focused on the maximum speed of the units. I'm talking about you, Rafa. It would be nice if we got something like escape mission or endurance encounter, but I think the age of the game is the main culprit for this, so I'll not be too much of an ass for that one. Despite the cons list being much larger than pros, overall I think that Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles is quite a good rendition of a classic title. The core gameplay is simple enough that people that didn't touch any tactical games before should be fine, and obfuscation of game mechanics works in favor of the game in regards to that audience. Veterans of the genre will probably quickly find out that the game is quite solved, and let's not sugarcoat this, quite easy. There's some balance issue with the design, but that's not something a casual player would notice. Which makes this a perfect game to start your adventure with tactical turn-based strategies. Added polish to the story, exposition and voice acting makes it even more approachable. And many known fantasy tropes used in it makes it easy for new players to immerse themselves in the story. It's also quite a feel-good experience. Both the storyline and the gameplay empowers the player with positive reinforcement, and there's no real way to get a bad ending. You'll save the world and be the hero fighting evil every time, which is something that most people expect from fantasy story with abundant magic and demons. All in all, I think it's a perfect game to start a very dangerous road into this kind of game experience. And you can probably lure some innocent souls into tactical games rabbit hole with it. But remember, you'll be responsible for hundreds of hours of their life that will disappear once they are hooked. Speaking of hundreds of hours. In the intro I mentioned that I would have some recommendations for other titles at the end of the review, and we're approaching that part of the video. My analytics are responsible for this segment. Data from YouTube tells me that the vast majority of my viewers are between 34 and 44 years of age, which kind of makes sense based on the style of the content. But that also means that most of you don't have that much free time like you used to have 2 decades ago. And you probably choose games you play quite carefully to not waste that precious free time for the hobby that's left after all that boring adult stuff. So I decided to showcase a few games that offer a similar experience to FFT, mostly in the game mechanics context, but in some cases also in the story department. First on the list will be Triangle Strategy. It's one of the newish Square Enix titles released in 2022. As for the people who made it, the most well-known name would be Tomoya Asano as a producer. The same guy that is responsible for the concept and production of both Octopath Travelers. And you probably at least heard of those games. But let's talk about gameplay now. Combat on the core level is very similar to FFT, but it has some very different aspects. There's no job system in the game. Each character has unique abilities in their personal skill set, and it's up to the player to figure out the best composition and synergies of units they deploy. The second difference is a very high impact of environments in the battlefield. We have obstacles that reduce movement range, breakable elements that open new paths, terrain that can be set aflame, water that transfers electrical damage, or even usage of map elements to traversal, like minecarts or ziplines. Some of your units can also deploy traps or create battlefield obstructions that cut off enemy movements. There's also one that can make makeshift ladders to create access paths for new places. Others are dedicated healers and or buffers. Over the course of the game we get a quite wide array of distinct skill sets. The game itself is much more focused on tactical use of the map than FFT, pushing enemies around, funneling them towards specific paths, deploying traps, or even casting magic to cast rain and create water puddles so you can electrify large groups of targets. Many skills also move the character on the battlefield when used, so you need to be careful that your charge forward will not leave someone surrounded, and that bleeds into the encounter objectives. There's maps where you need to reach specific tiles while fending off enemies, others require you to neutralize environmental threats. In some cases you need to survive a specific amount of turns too. We have quite the variety. There's also a system of enemy reinforcements that spawn in additional targets on specific triggers, be it timed or location based. So there's sometimes a very nasty surprise that you need to quickly adjust to. The game has a quite heavy narrative focus, which may be a flaw for some people. Characters are locked behind story paths and choices you make, but for me that was incentive to actually replay the game. As for the quality of the plot, let's say that's not great but not terrible, and to leave it at that. There's a total of 4 different endings, and on the road there you'll have quite a few choices that impact not only encounters, but also allies that you can recruit. Of course, on New Game Plus you can start with already recruited units and have more options to use even in the earliest encounters. The game also syncs enemy level to your character level, so you cannot out-level and invalidate the difficulty, which is a great feature. And while there's no random encounters, you can quickly gain access to a mock battle system which offers 50 different encounters, unlocked as you progress the story paths. I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with endurance battle there, against 99 enemy units that come in waves. Last thing I want to mention is the use of action points. Each skill other than basic attack has an AP cost, which works great as a balancing game mechanic, but also as a strategy. You cannot use your best strongest skills each turn. They require some setup and turns without action. But the same is true for the enemies, and that's why there are characters that can manipulate AP of allies and enemies. It's a very nice layering of complexities, allowing the player to build up synergies that they are comfortable with, and match their playstyle. I think it's a natural step up from FFT in terms of tactical complexity, without loading too much unit customization to the player. We get a wide variety of tools and can mix and match them for maximum fun. Moving up on the complexity scale and down on the list of recommendation, we have Fell Seal, Arbiter's Mark. It's an indie title that had a very successful Kickstarter way back in 2017. It's very heavy inspired by the FFT and Tactics Ogre series, and that really shows. Core gameplay is very similar to Final Fantasy Tactics, but has much deeper class and equipment systems. Veterans of FFT will very quickly find their place with this game, but also be surprised by the amount of viable choices for the party loadout, not to mention the buildcraft. Fell Seal tells you bluntly what will you get when gaining a level in a specific class, and also gives you a permanent boost for mastering each of them. This encourages experimentation in the playstyle, unlocking new abilities and searching for synergies. It even addresses the generic units problem. While story characters have their unique classes, there are also classes that can be unlocked only on generic units, like Werewolf or Vampire for example. There's also a nice upgrade for dual wielding systems. You can mix and match any one-handed weapons. And yes, you can make a dual pistol wielding vampire in this game. It's actually quite a nice build to use. There's also a possibility of dual wielding spears or scythes if that's more of your thing. Similar to triangle strategy, we also have some skills that include character movement or enemy movement, but not as much. While TS is more focused on battlefield tactics and synergies, Fell Seal is Buildcrafter's paradise, especially with the DLC that unlocks monsters as party units. That system is also more complex than you would think. Not only each monster type has its own specific skills, they can also slot a combination of two subclasses, each with their own abilities and modifiers. The amount of hours you can spend in this game just trying out new build is quite scary. But if that's your thing, you will take this not as a warning, but as an encouragement. Now let's move a little outside the pure fantasy style. Third place on this list is occupied by 3 titles at once. The quote-unquote new Shadowrun trilogy by Harebrained Schemes is another very successful indie project that deserves some attention. And it's quite often present on Steam sale as a 3-game bundle. If you're a fan of tactical turn-based combat, this is a great deal. I think Shadowrun is my favorite setting. The mix of cyberpunk dystopia and fantasy just hits the right spot in my brain. But I know it's not for everybody. Setting and story aside, time to focus on the gameplay, which is very enjoyable and quite complex. Turns are more like Fire Emblem. Your team goes first, then the enemy team. Combat is heavily reliant on battlefield awareness, lines of sight, and cover mechanics, and getting the right team to do the job. Objectives on assignments can vary in quite a wide range. In some cases, taking the right team can allow you to skip most of the combat. Roleplay choices matter, the same with your character build. If you have someone with high strength, you can probably move the heavy stuff and unlock different paths for the rest of the team. It is a different type of tactical approach, much more similar to TTRPGs than typical turn-based combat games. But in my opinion it flows nicely with the action point turn-based fights. If you get your hands on the trilogy, remember this. Hong Kong, the newest title in the series, has the best fully polished mechanics and gameplay. So if you start from there, the other two may be a slight disappointment. I personally would suggest starting with Dragonfall. I think it has the best story and the gameplay is fine enough to not discourage new players. Shadowrun Returns, the dev's first title in the series, well, shows some age. And Kickstarter budget constraints. Play at your own risk. Now it's the time for the final entry. Tactics Ogre Reborn, a remake of another Square classic, in the quality I hope the Ivalice Chronicles would be. The Ogre series was a precursor for FFT, so you can easily spot similarities both in gameplay and UI. Reborn, however, offers much more, not only in terms of combat and build crafting, but also story and replayability. After over 320 hours in this game, I still haven't recruited all the types of units and got all the cool gear. That should show you the outline of the monster that this title is. Not only that, the game is still a challenge. Endgame dungeons have a level scaling mechanics, and enemies can be way above your level cap. It looks cheap at first, but turns out this is a great balance for players' tactical mind and optimization ability. Positioning, buffs, debuffs, synergies, focus fire, all this matters. Some classes have a specific counters to them, and having up to 12 units on the battlefield on your end can mean there's sometimes up to 30 units total in the combat at the same time. Tactics Ogre does not play around. If there's a large-scale battle, there's a large-scale battle. In a similar way to Triangle strategy, we don't start with full resources. MP needs to be generated in combat, and that means the army of mages is not exactly a good idea. They will be massacred by fast frontliners and archers before they can cast any spell, which tends to much more interesting compositions in combat. Not to mention that having a 100 unit party size limit encourages keeping specialists around and deploying them on demand. This version of the game comes with brilliant voice acting for all in-game cutscenes, and this highlights a very different approach to the war story. Your choices matter, and once enemies can become allies, and the other way around. No one is safe in this game, including the main character. Branching story paths and unique characters locked behind specific routes offer a great replayability, even if you're only interested in the story aspect of the game. And after reaching the final of the base story, you unlock ability to go back in time, so you and your party can make different choices. It's still quite well balanced, since any encounter you didn't do earlier will have level scaling to offer you some challenge. The game also has the original Deep Dungeon, the precursor of Midlight Deep, a 100-floor behemoth of a dungeon with hard level cap and no ability to live without starting back from the start. It's brutal, but has some of the best encounters, and of course, gear drops. All of this is not even the endgame. This release comes with 4 DLC bundled up that are seamlessly added to the game after the final boss encounter, and those are hard. But offer new unique characters with unique classes, great items, and most importantly, a very nice challenge even for the team that cleared Deep Dungeon and it's decked out in ancient relics. I personally rank this game as the best tactical RPG currently on the market. It has a very high quality, the depth and complexity is there to be lost in, and the possibilities and sheer scope of the game makes the purchase a great value deal. Especially if you grab it during the sale for like 50% off. But say goodbye to your free time in advance. Okay, I think that's enough of this video. I'll probably hate myself for the size of the script, not to mention working on the subtitles and sprites timing. But hey, maybe you will now know what will be your next time waster for a few months. Let me also know in the comments if some of the titles caught your eye and you want to hear more about their mechanics and design. Drop a like and sub to the channel for Algorithm Jesus. And remind me to streamline my video production process, because this will be a nightmare to edit. See ya in the next one.